They reached every corner of the galaxy, but they will not cross Earth's sky. Long after humanity fractured into stars and dust, long after Earth was forgotten by maps and memory, one truth remained whispered across star systems and gas giant temples. The Ivari, oldest of all known species, never entered Earth's orbit, not once, not in 10,000 years, and no one, not empires, not scholars, not the Ivari themselves, could say why. The last known human born, Alaraken, stood alone beneath Earth's shattered magnetosphere, her boots pressed into ancient blackened soil where the continents had crumbled like ash into oceans long evaporated. She was the last emissary of the old homeworld. The Earth had no voice left to speak through her, above her, in the silence of low orbit, for Ivari obelisks hovered, like deathless sentinels, 10 kilometers tall, carved from living crystal, older than most stars. But still, they would not descend. They never did. The children of the stars called the Ivari Eternals, not because they lived forever, though they nearly did, but because they remembered everything. They cataloged entire worlds, nurtured young civilizations, and walked with warlords and prophets from 1,000 species. But not with humans, never with humans, and they never set foot on Earth. The mystery drove scholars mad, sparked cults, and even ignited the proxy wars over theories. Some believed Earth had been cursed. Others thought it held an ancient weapon too terrible to awaken, but Alara didn't care for speculation. She was born for answers, and she didn't have time. She crouched near a broken shell of a UN orbital listening tower, now crusted with dust and thorns. Her gloved fingers brushed across a slab of alloy plating beneath it, a biometric vault that hadn't opened since the Sol collapsed nearly 900 years ago. Her voice, hoarse from weeks of silent travel and cracked air, rasped into the dry wind. It's time. She pressed her blood-covered palm to the scanner. It flickered, failed, then accepted. Vault integrity, 6%. Warning, planetary biosphere is critically uninhabitable. The panel opened with a hiss of dry gas, revealing a lightless tunnel descending into the heart of a forgotten Earth. Alaraken was not like the humans of old. She had never seen oceans, never known blue sky. She'd grown up in the cairn, a cold station tethered to the orbit of a neutron star in what used to be called the Vesper Expanse. Born to descendants of human engineers and exiled rebels, she had survived famine, iron storms, and the death of 2 out of every 3 crew members during the Iron Plague of 8611A. But she'd also found something once, a transmission, scrambled, ancient, buried in darkwave frequencies, a Ivari voice, repeating one phrase in broken old Terran: "Do not wake what sleeps beneath Earth." She had dedicated her life to finding out why. The elevator shaft screeched as it descended, the old world mechanisms groaning from age and rust. Around her, she passed through what once was a deep Earth facility hardened against nuclear fire, solar flares, and extinction itself. Holograms flickered in the dust. Project, Art Vault, access level, celestial black, status, unknown. She stepped into a chamber whose light still worked. The floor was tiled in dark obsidian, curved with runes not of human origin. In the center, a single object floated, not with gravity tech, but as if it refused to acknowledge physical law. A cube of impossible material, smooth as glass, glowing with a heartbeat rhythm. She approached, pulse racing in every sensor, and her suit failed instantly. Then the room spoke. Designation, Alaraken. Welcome, blood of Earth. You are not too late. She stumbled back. What? Who? Her voice trembled for the first time in years. The cube pulsed, and in her mind, a chorus of voices thundered, voices old, layered like strata in ancient stone. We are memory. We are the lock, and we have waited for you. A shadow moved behind the walls, not mechanical, not human, something older. She blinked. For a moment, she saw it, a vast shape etched across dimensions, not alive, but not dead either, held within the vault. If they cross Earth's orbit, the voices whispered, it awakens. The realization struck her harder than gravity. The Ivari didn't avoid Earth out of fear of humans. They feared what humans had buried, and now, she had just unlocked it. Asterisk, if they cross Earth's orbit, it awakens. The words echoed in Alaraken's skull like a drumbeat carved from thunder. She stood frozen in the Arc Vault's black chamber, eyes fixed on the floating cube pulsing with unnatural light. The Ivari, beings who had survived supernovae, black hole collapses, and the collapse of empires, had refused to step foot near Earth. Now she knew why. They weren't keeping Earth isolated. They were keeping something inside. Designation, Alarakan. Confirm your intent. The voice had no gender, no accent, no warmth. It was too old for such things. It did not ask with curiosity, it demanded clarity. It required truth. Elara's throat was dry, heart pounding. What is it? What did we bury here? The cube pulsed. The air around it cracked faintly, like the fabric of space itself bending under ancient weight. Before Earth fell, your kind made a choice, not to win, not to survive, but to trap what cannot be killed. A shape shimmered in the air, a hologram, primitive but enormous. It showed a war not recorded in any surviving human archive. Planets burning, cities torn asunder by storm-like tendrils. Space-time bleeding colors that should not exist. At the center of it all was a shape. No, not a shape. It was something conscious, something that fed not on matter, but on memory and soul. It had no name. The closest humans had ever called it was the null. And 900 years ago, Earth had sealed it in her core. Elara stumbled backward. No one remembers this, not even the Cairn archives. Why? Because remembrance is a doorway, because memory is how it returns. Suddenly, it made sense. The Ivari hadn't merely avoided Earth, they had orchestrated its erasure from galactic culture. Not as punishment. As quarantine. Her head ached. Data flooding her neural link from the vault systems. They had buried everything, deleted global AI networks, severed orbital relays, and scuttled the Soul Archive satellites. Every whisper of the null had been scrubbed from human and alien history alike. But something had changed. Above orbit, aboard the Ivari vessel Vaishal Nar, a warning beacon pulsed with urgency. High Elder Tsarun Maka, whose crystalline spine curled like a serpent's coil, loomed over the planetary scans of Earth. His 6 glowing eyes flared, and his subordinates trembled as the readings from the Arc Vault began shifting. The lock was weakening. It has touched a living mind again, Tsarun growled, voice a choir of glass shards. This breach must be sealed. Earth must burn. The room fell silent. A younger Ivari priestess dared to speak. High Elder, what if the human is not the breach but the key to reforging the prison? Tsarun's body flickered. Humanity. Forged that tomb with blood, chaos, and sacrifice. But they were naive. They chained fire with paper. That human below has already unsealed the first gate. Another priest murmured, shall we descend and ensure? No. The elder's voice became a THUNDERCLAP. And that was the confirmation. The Ivari would not step onto Earth, because even they feared it would awaken what they could not kill again. Alara's suit systems began to fail, radiation spiking, pressure fluctuating. The vault was becoming unstable. Warning, the AI intoned. Containment field integrity at 82%, 79%, 75%. She backed toward the lift. Alara Ken, the voice said again, more human this time. You are blood of Earth, but not of its sins. You carry what remains of hope. The lock may still hold, but not for long. You must decide. Run, or restore the chains. The cube dimmed and the whisper stopped. She reached the surface hours later. The Ivaria bellies still hovered above like silent judges. But now, Alara felt it, a presence underneath the crust of her planet, brushing against her thoughts like fingers trailing across glass. It was curious. It was hungry, and it remembered her. In the distance. Her ship, the Hallow Shape, beeped to life. Auto defenses online. A transmission blinking. Encrypted, untraceable, from a human signal. Alara's eyes widened. She hadn't heard from another human soul in over 12 years. She activated the message. If you're hearing this, you've reached the vault. I'm Commander Idris Harlan of the Dauntless Fleet. We buried the truth and erased ourselves for the galaxy's sake. But it's waking up again, and if it does, no species survives, not even the Ivari. We left you something in orbit around Europa. Find it, before they decide Earth must die. Above, in the Ivari vessel, Tsarun's voice thundered. To the stars, prepare the soul annihilation protocol. Let humanity become myth again. If they cross Earth's orbit, it awakens. The words echoed in Alara Ken's skull like a drumbeat carved from thunder. She stood frozen in the Arc Vault's black chamber, eyes fixed on the floating cube pulsing with unnatural light. The Ivari, beings who had survived supernovae, black hole collapses, and the collapse of empires, had refused to step foot near Earth. Now she knew why. They weren't keeping Earth isolated. They were keeping something inside. Designation, Alara Ken. Confirm your intent. The voice had no gender, no accent, no warmth. It was too old for such things. It did not ask with curiosity, it demanded clarity. It required truth. Elara's throat was dry, heart pounding. What is it? What did we bury here? The cube pulsed. The air around it cracked faintly, like the fabric of space itself bending under ancient weight. Before it fell, your kind made a choice, not to win, not to survive, but to trap what cannot be killed. A shape shimmered in the air, a hologram, primitive but enormous. It showed a war not recorded in any surviving human archive. Planets burning, cities torn asunder by storm-like tendrils. Space-time bleeding colors that should not exist. At the center of it all was a shape. No, not a shape. It was something conscious, something that fed not on matter, but on memory and soul. It had no name. The closest humans had ever called it was the null. And 900 years ago, Earth had sealed it in her core. Elara stumbled backward. No one remembers this, not even the Cairn archives. Why? Because remembrance is a doorway, because memory is how it returns. Suddenly, it made sense. The Ivari hadn't merely avoided Earth, they had orchestrated its erasure from galactic culture. Not as punishment. As quarantine. Her head ached. Data flooding her neural link from the vault systems. They had buried everything, deleted global AI networks, severed orbital relays, and scuttled the soul archive satellites. Every whisper of the null had been scrubbed from human and alien history alike. But something had changed. Above orbit, aboard the Ivari vessel Vashel Nar, a warning beacon pulsed with urgency. High Elder Tsarun Maka, whose crystalline spine curled like a serpent's coil, loomed over the planetary scans of Earth. His 6 glowing eyes flared, and his subordinates trembled as the readings from the Arc Vault began shifting. The lock was weakening. It has touched a living mind again, Tsarun growled, voice a choir of glass shards. This breach must be sealed. Earth must burn. The room fell silent. A younger Ivari priestess dared to speak. High Elder, what if the human is not the breach but the key to reforging the prison? Tsarun's body flickered. Humanity. Forged that tomb with blood, chaos, and sacrifice. But they were naive. They chained fire with paper. The human below has already unsealed the first gate. Another priest murmured, shall we descend and ensure? No. The elder's voice became a thunderclap. And that was the confirmation. The Ivari would not step onto Earth, because even they feared it would awaken what they could not kill again. Elara's suit systems began to fail, radiation spiking, pressure fluctuating. The vault was becoming unstable. Warning, the AI intoned. Containment field integrity at 82%, 79%, 75%. She backed toward the lift. Elara can, the voice said again, more human this time. You are blood of Earth, but not of its sins. You carry what remains of hope. The lock may still hold, but not for long. You must decide, run, or restore the chains. The cube dimmed and the whispers stopped. She reached the surface hours later. The Ivari bellies still hovered above like silent judges. But now, Elara felt it, a presence underneath the crust of her planet, brushing against her thoughts like fingers trailing across glass. It was curious. It was hungry, and it remembered her. In the distance, her ship, the Hallow Shape, beeped to life. Auto defenses. Online, the transmission blinking. Encrypted, untraceable, from a human signal. Elara's eyes widened. She hadn't heard from another human soul in over 12 years. She activated the message. If you're hearing this, you've reached the vault. I'm Commander Idris Harlan of the Dauntless Fleet. We buried the truth and erased ourselves for the galaxy's sake, but it's waking up again. And if it does, no species survives. Not even the Ivari. We left you something in orbit around Europa. Find it, before they decide Earth must die. Above, in the Ivari vessel. Tsarun's voice thundered to the stars. Prepare the soul annihilation protocol. Let humanity become myth again. She lit a fire we buried in ash. Now the galaxy has no choice but to remember. Unknown survivor transmission. Intercepted near Proxima debris field. Journey to Titan was chaos. Gravitational distortions from the null were growing stronger. Invisible waves that bent reality like wind through glass. The Hallow Shade shuddered every few hours, hull groaning like something ancient clawed against the edge of time. But Elara Ken held her course. She no longer looked like the lone scavenger who stepped onto Earth weeks ago. Sleepless, wired to ancient code relays, armor retooled with lost dauntless tech. She was becoming something else, not a soldier, not a legend, but a link, the last unbroken thread between what was sealed and what might rise. She stood on the edge of the Titan system, now below her, seas of liquid methane, storms as black as void, and somewhere beneath it all, the chain, final approach sequence locked. She murmured to the ship's AI, though it barely responded anymore. Arm re-entry capsule. No return flight expected. The ship gave a low whine in response. She smiled softly. Yeah, me neither. Her fingers tapped the last manual override. The halo shade detached the capsule, and Alara descended into Titan's darkness. Meanwhile, beyond Saturn's rings, the Obsidian Choir arrived. 12 HFY war temples, carved from crystallized comet bones, now encircled soul-like judges at an execution. Inside the largest, Tsarun stood with his hands folded before a burning star map. She approaches the chain. If she reaches it, containment may be restored. But if she fails, the Null inherits her. His second in command, Priest General Calling, hissed through her crystalline teeth. She's only one human. Tsarun's eyes, glowing like twin suns, didn't waver. So was Idris. So were the first SAC or IFICERS. And so were all harbingers of change. Alara's capsule struck Titan's surface like a comet. She emerged coughing, armor cracked, frost instantly coating every surface. Methane storms howled around her like the planet itself was warning her away. Her scanner pulsed, faintly tracking Idris's signal. She climbed over frozen ridges, waded through sludge oceans, and finally reached a jagged, silver spire protruding from beneath the ice, not of human design. It pulsed faintly. She touched it, and the world shifted. A scream tore through her skull. Not sound, but thought. A presence. A mind not hers, brushing against her own and had found her, the Null. It didn't speak in words. It bled into her memories. She saw her mother's death again. Not as it was, but twisted. She saw herself walking away from the cairn station, the lights going dark forever, and she saw Idris, chained to a wheel of fire beneath Earth's core, screaming as memory was stripped from him like flesh. You do not bind me. You are my vessel now. She clenched her jaw, forced her mind to focus. No, she whispered. You are the cage. She plunged her hand into the spire's glowing face, and the storm stopped in orbit. Every HFY war temple's alarm screamed. She's breached the chain, shouted Calling. It's activating. Tsarun didn't blink. Too soon. The Null is still bound in her. If the chain awakens fully, suddenly the stars shifted, not moved, obeyed. A hidden gravitic array, ancient beyond reckoning, buried beneath Titan's crust, reactivated. Rings of energy spiraled out like ripples in spacetime, and across the system, the dead began to speak. One by one, derelict dauntless fleet ships came online. Old AI fragments rebooted by the chain's command signal. Above Neptune, the wreck of the Red Honor blinked awake in Sirius orbit. The fractured Nomad sun turned its cannons toward the stars, and near Mars, a lone survivor beacon sent out 5 words. We hear you, Alara Ken. But it was too late for safety. The HFY responded. A single war temple dove toward Titan like a blade. Calling led the charge, her mind burning with righteous fury, and her before the chain bonds. Alara, now linked to the chain, saw it coming. She opened her eyes, glowing now, filled with data and fire. I don't need to fight you, she whispered. I just need to show you what we buried. She raised her hand. The surface of Titan cracked, and from beneath, an image erupted into the sky. Not of war, but of humanity's final stand. Billions linked across Earth's crust. Minds merged into one great thought wall, forcing the Null back into the core through sheer will, screaming, burning, breaking, but winning. The HFY ship paused. Calling froze. Even in her hate, she felt it. The truth. Tsarun watched in silence from high orbit. They were not beasts, he said. They were not monsters. They were the seal. His voice cracked with something his kind had not felt in Ian's regret. ELA collapsed, her veins glowing like starlines, breath ragged. The chain was now part of her, and so was the Null. Somewhere behind her eyes, it waited. Not free, but watching, across the stars, humans hidden for generations in asteroid sanctuaries, derelict stations, forgotten moons. Receive the message. The chain is active. Earth remembers. The seal holds. We rise. She didn't just wake the chain, she woke us. Final broadcast from the series Refuge Council. Hours before they vanished into FTL silence, Alara Ken drifted between consciousness and something deeper. The chain Titan's secret, ancient, Machine bound to Idris Harlan's last command had accepted her, not as operator, not even as heir, but as anchor. Inside her bloodstream now pulsed the gravitic codes of the Dauntless network. Inside her mind echoed whispers from long-dead captains, soldiers, engineers, fragments of human memory woven into technology. But not all the voices belonged to the dead. Some belonged to it. The Null was still there, curled deep in her neural shadows, like a serpent warming to her thoughts, and it was learning. Above Titan, chaos brewed. The Obsidian Choir retreated temporarily, their lead war temple damaged from the psychic pulse Alara had released. But now, they prepared a final protocol, an act so rare in Yvari history it had only been used once before: planetary unweaving, a weaponized temporal inversion field, a system-wide rollback, not just to destroy Earth, but to erase its entire causal footprint. In the chain chamber, Alara stood, gaunt, eyes sunken, but blazing with cold fire. The air around her vibrated with resonance from awakened Dauntless notes scattered throughout the system. Her voice echoed across the relay. To every soul that still calls themselves human, I carry the last voice of Earth. The chain has awakened. The Nullsters, the Yvari plan to unweave our history. If we don't stop them, there will never have been a human race. She paused. Her voice broke slightly. You don't have to fight for Earth. Fight for the memory of who we were. Across the broken sectors of the old Terran expansion, Alara's voice lit beacons long considered dead. On Phobos Station, a clan of iron-willed descendants of fleet engineers activated forgotten weapons platforms. On the rogue colony ship Exile's Grace, drifting near the Helios Rift, their scavenged AI finished decoding the Dauntless failsafe, a command code that could fracture a war temple's crystalline armor. And in the shattered wreck of the Nomad Sun, deep within asteroid V9's gravity pocket, a man named Commander Rourke stood up from cryostasis. He looked 40. He was nearly 300 years old, and he remembered Alara's name. Meanwhile, aboard the Yvari Prime Choice ship, High Elder Tsrun made his final decision. The chain has bonded. The Nullsters, the humans rise. We cannot afford hesitation. The prompt singularity crystal hummed with dark energy. Prepare the unweaving. The moment Alara stepped outside the chain chamber, her vision fractured. She saw futures, some hers, some not. One where Earth burned, one where stars wept, one where her body was consumed from within by the Null, one where she stood on a silver bridge, speaking to a child not yet born. The stars behind her finally silent. She gritted her teeth and forced the visions down. This was the cost. This was the turning point. She boarded the Hallow Shade, now running on patched Dauntless protocols. The ship's voice had changed. Welcome, Alara Ken. Activation level, Celestial Black. Chain link confirmed. Take me to Earth. She said, Earth orbit is under quiet lockdown. Risk of interception, 99.7%. Not asking for odds. The AI paused, understood. As she accelerated toward Earth, the skies above Sol erupted. The scattered pieces of humanity answered her call. Dozens of ghost ships, long hidden or scavenged, arrived from every forgotten corner of the system. They weren't war-ready, they weren't unified, but they flew under the Dauntless beacon, and behind them, a legend rose, the Dauntless itself, the last surviving flagship, buried beneath Jupiter's magnetosphere, now rebuilt, patched together by a rebel colony using whispers of old codes, passed down for generations. Her hull glowed with memories and fury. Commander Rourke's voice boomed across the system. Humanity stands. You came to erase us. Let the stars bear witness we are still here. The Choice ship opened its unweaving matrix. Time itself began to bend, planets flickering, moons shifting slightly in orbital memory. But it was too late. Alara reached Earth. She opened the final relay, and from the Earth's core, the original thought wall stirred. Billions of voices, ancestors, warriors, children, lovers, their neural echoes poured into space like a scream made of light. The Choice ship faltered. Tsrun collapsed to his knees. They preserved all of themselves, even in death. Inside her cockpit, Alara trembled. The Null surged inside her, roaring in defiance. But it didn't understand. It thought memory was weakness. It didn't understand why they remembered. Because for humans, memory wasn't nostalgia. It was fuel. You want to be free? She whispered, voice filled with pain. Then take it. Take all of it. And she unleashed every neural fragment the chain held. Her childhood, her agony, her dreams, the death of her mother, the failure of the cairn, the loneliness of being. The last, the grief of a species nearly lost. She gave it everything. And in that flood, the null screamed. It couldn't contain it. It broke. For the first time in 10,000 years it feared. The unweaving collapsed. The choice ship shattered. And in the burning sky above Earth, a new constellation blinked into being, not of stars, but of names. They gave it memory to break it. They gave it pain to remind it what it could never feel. And it shattered. Final logs of the dauntless AI. Celestial core accessed battle had ended, but the war had not. Above Earth, the remnants of the Obsidian Choir drifted like broken teeth in the void. Their once pristine crystal war temples darkened, cracked, or spiraling off course. The unweaving matrix had collapsed mid-deployment, its gravitic singularity undone by a wave of human memory devastated the quantified. And in the wreckage, among the dead and damaged, Alara Ken remained alive, but barely. The chain had pulled her too far. She floated inside her ship, skin pale, eyes bleeding faint light from oversaturated neural contact. Her body twitched every few seconds from micro-seizures. She hadn't spoken in hours, but inside her mind, inside her soul, the forces still wrestled. One was her own, burned, stubborn, flawed, but incandescent with human memory. The other was the null, fractured, cornered, but not yet dead. It had tasted the worst humanity had to offer: grief, guilt, fear, failure, but also their secret weapon. Defiance. It had no answer for that. Yet. The dauntless fleet had regrouped. Over a dozen vessels now formed a loose shield wall around Earth, battered and smoking, but holding. From the Red Honor to the Exile's Grace, survivors had rallied around Alara's beacon, not because she promised victory, but because she refused extinction. At their center, the Dauntless herself, reborn from wreckage, her engines burning white-blue across Sol like a resurrection made metal. Commander Rourke stood on the bridge, jaw-locked, staring at the latest scans. "She's not going to last," he said. "The null's still in her, and it's adapting." Beside him, a young comms officer spoke softly. "We can't extract her neural core without killing her." "I know," Rourke said, but she knew that too. In orbit around Europa, high, Elder Tarun had survived the Choir's collapse, barely. His body had cracked in 5 places. Crystalline fluid bled from fissures in his joints, but his mind remained sharp. And for the first time in his long existence, he hesitated. The humans had not unleashed a weapon. They had not triggered a biophage or mind plague. They had done something no other species had attempted. They had given the enemy themselves. Tarun studied the gravitic echoes in the system. The null signal was folding inwards, weakening but also transforming. "It has evolved," he whispered. His second in command, Colleen, spoke with trembling resonance. "Is that victory?" Tarun shook his ruined head. "No, this is the last breath before the scream." The null was born from void, but now it knows pain, and pain, once known, demands to be answered. Inside the hollow shade, Alara gasped awake. Bloodstream from her nose. Her breath came ragged, a voice not her own, not the null's, but something deeper spoke inside her head. Chain signal unstable, core breach imminent, neural collapse in 17 minutes. She forced her body to move. It felt like lifting stone with broken arms. She reached the pilot interface, hand trembling, prepare for final protocol. The ship's AI hesitated. "This will terminate host." "Do it anyway." Far above, the dauntless AI flickered. "Alara Ken has initiated Celestial Black Protocol. Memory core burn. Full anchor detonation. Outcome uncertain." Commander Rourke slammed his fist into the console. "No, we don't abandon her." His exo stared. "Sir, she's going to burn her soul to collapse the null's consciousness, and we're going to stop that from killing her." He turned to the fleet, voice sharp, cold. "All ships, begin neural echo transfer. I want every human out there, every mind, every memory connected to her link. We share the weight. We hold the line." A pause. Then, across the fleet, voices responded, affirmative. "For Earth, for Alara, for memory." Alara saw it, a wave of light, thousands of pulses, minds touching hers, children's laughter, lovers saying goodbye. Soldiers dying on asteroids. Parents sacrificing air for their sons, old men tending gardens in orbital silence. They gave her their pain. They gave her their love. They gave her what made them human. With it, she stood. The null scream. It erupted from within her like black fire, desperate, fractured, trying to climb back into silence, But now it was seen. Now it was known. And it could never go back to unknowing. ELA or A opened the chain one last time. You wanted to be everything. So here's what that means. And she fed it the last thing it never understood. Hope. In a flash of impossible color, light exploded across orbit. The halo shade vanished in a blaze of gold and white. The null collapsed. Not destroyed. Contained. By choice. It had seen humanity, and it could not endure the weight of what they were. When Alara woke, her body was wrapped in medfoam. She was aboard the DAUNTLESS. Commander Rourke sat beside her. You broke the unbreakable, he said softly. She blinked. Did we win? He nodded. You didn't just save Earth, Ken. You reminded us why it was worth saving. I saw her wrapped in fire, standing between extinction and eternity, and she did not kneel. Testimony from Commander Rourke. Soul Unity Accord. Snow was gone, not dead, not destroyed, but broken and bound again, not by chains or machines, but by the very essence of what it could never comprehend. Humanity. It writhed now in the deepest currents of the chain's gravitic folds, held tight by the memories it had tried to erase, crushed by the emotions it had once found alien and corrosive: hope, grief, love, sacrifice. The system was silent, too silent, because what remained was the aftermath of transcendence, and in its silence, the galaxy finally looked inward. Alara. Ken walked again, slowly, carefully. The medics aboard the Dauntless had done what they could, but no skin could explain what she had endured. Neural pathways had regrown in unfamiliar patterns. Bone density had shifted. Even her DNA showed traces of chain resonance, as if the vaults of Titan had etched themselves into her being. She was still Alara, but also something more. Not a weapon, not a saying, but a witness. And now, that witness would speak. The Ivari Council, crippled by the loss of the choir, had issued a summons across all sectors. A singular request. We will enter Earth's orbit. We request an audience with her for the first time in 11,000 years. The Ivari would set foot near Earth. Not as conquerors, but as students, aboard the Dauntless. In Earth orbit, the fleet waited. Ships patched together with scar metal and welded prayers, scavenger destroyers, hidden colony vessels, ancient AI-guided scouts, and at the center, Alara, now seated before the fleet's unified command link. When the Ivari emissary arrived, a silver-bodied priest bearing crystalline tattoos, he didn't speak immediately. He knelt. A ripple of disbelief moved through the humans watching. The emissary raised his hands. We feared your world not because it held the null, but because it held what the null could not survive. He turned to Alara. You did not just contain it. You converted it, not to your cause, but to your pain, and in doing so, you made it feel, and that broke it. Alara rose, still weak, but steady. Her voice, when it came, was rough, like the earth itself speaking through cracked soil and dust. We didn't set out to be heroes. We only wanted to remember what it meant to be human. She stepped forward. You feared Earth because you didn't understand what we buried here. But it wasn't the null that terrified you. It was us. You watched us break in silence, and you thought our silence meant surrender. Her eyes met the emissaries, but it meant we were listening to every name, every scream, every memory you tried to forget for us. She pointed to the sky. Now the galaxy listens, too. The emissary's body shimmered. He bowed his head again. Then teach us. The message spread fast. Faster than FTL relays, faster than any government transmission ever had. Because it wasn't carried through wires or signals. It was carried through people. It became story. A girl who found a vault. A voice that remembered. A mind that held a god's nightmare. A fleet of forgotten survivors who shared their pain, and in doing so, won. They didn't win through conquest. They didn't build a super weapon. They didn't erase the enemy. They understood it and made it see itself, and that was enough to shatter a creature older than stars. At the edge of the Orion Drift, a colony of war refugees painted a mural, Alara wrapped in golden fire, arms raised, the null unraveling behind, her in ribbons of black light. On the moons of Virix 7, songs were sung in languages that had never known Earth, but now whispered her name with reverence. And on the ancient ruins of Cairn Station, the place Alara had abandoned so long ago, new children played among flickering lights. They weren't hiding anymore. They were home. 1 week later, in Earth orbit, the final gathering began. Every surviving ship, every colony envoy, every Vari priest and scholar Every last sliver of civilization that had once turned its back on humanity. And at the center, Elara, she stood before a projection of stars. Their constellation bent now into something new, a spiral, shaped like the old Terran DNA strand. Her voice echoed through every speaker, every relay. We are not myths. We are not ghosts. We are not the mistake you buried. She placed her hand over her heart. We are humanity. We break. We rise. We remember. Above her, the stars pulsed, and the old warning that had hovered above Earth, the one the Ivari had etched into orbit millennia ago, shimmered, then vanished, replaced by a single word. Remember. Asterisk. She didn't save us. She reminded us we were never truly gone. Memorial wall inscription, Unity Garden, Earth chain slept. Not broken, not forgotten. Just resting, its humming spires beneath Titan's frozen seas now calm. Its quantum relays no longer trembling with the null's distant rage. What had once threatened to consume the galaxy was now encased in a prison not of steel or code, but of memory. And memory, Alarakan had shown, was something humanity never lost. Even when everything else was stripped away, on Earth, cities began to breathe again, not all at once, not perfectly, but gardens were planted where bombed-out plazas once stood. Streets were swept clean by hands that had once clenched in fear. The orbital platforms, once silent, now pulsed with life. Children played on the banks of the Thames again, under skies cleared not by technology, but by time. And high above them, in a cradle of fire-forged metal, the Dauntless watched over the planet she had died protecting. Elara walked through Unity Garden. Beneath the tree that had sprouted from the ashes of the old memorial, she wore no armor now, just a dark coat, simple boots, and the faintest shimmer of chain resonance still flickering behind her eyes. People stared as she passed. Some whispered, others offered quiet nods of respect, but no one stopped her. She wasn't their commander, not their savior, just a reminder that humanity didn't survive because of strength. They endured because of something deeper. Something more dangerous, something the Null had never understood and never would. Hope wrapped in memory. At the far end of the garden stood the Unity Wall, a curved monument of crystal and alloy, polished and gleaming in the soft earth sun. Across its face, names were etched in every known human language, and even a few borrowed from the Ivari, who insisted on adding their own. Elara found the name she'd been searching for, Alan Ken. Her mother, dead before it fell, dead before the Cairn failure, a name buried not in battle, but in obscurity, now engraved in silver light. She touched it, forehead to the metal. Still here, she whispered. Behind her, the wind carried laughter. Children again. No null, no orbiting, silence, no alien judgment, just life. Above the planet, the Ivari stood watch, not as guards, but as allies. They had signed the Soul Unity Accords, their empire publicly acknowledging the catastrophe they had helped perpetuate. They surrendered their remaining choirships to the Memory Council, agreed to provide navigational technologies, and most importantly declared Soul to be a sanctum, a place not of exile, but of origin. No longer avoided, no longer whispered about in fear. Earth had become legend, and legends, the galaxy had learned, demand reverence. In a quiet ceremony on the deck of the Dauntless, Commander Rourke addressed the fleet one last time. We gathered in desperation. We flew not as an army, but as a memory of one, and yet, what we built here was more than resistance. It was a promise. He looked to Elara, to the one who held the weight no one else could. Thank you. She didn't respond. She only nodded. The kind of nod that says, you don't have to thank me. Just remember, years passed. The chain was never reopened, but neither was it destroyed. Elara had refused, stating that the galaxy must always remember what almost was a sealed tomb. A scar kept visible, a wound never allowed to fester in darkness again. The Null remained bound in that gravity-warped silence, kept in place by the very thing it feared most, human legacy. On the 100th anniversary of the chain's awakening, a message was broadcast from Earth, not encrypted, not militarized. Just a single voice, Elara Kent. Her hair silver now, her voice softer, older, but unwavering. To those who were lost, we remember you. To those who rose, we honor you. And to those who still fear what waits in the dark, know this, we faced it, and we endured. She smiled gently, not because we were the strongest, but because we refuse to forget who we are. Across the galaxy, That message was played at birth ceremonies, at funerals, in classrooms, temples, and outposts so far from Sol they could barely see its sun. And always, it ended the same way. That day, the galaxy learned what it means to be human. The end.